Hi and welcome to Watercolor with Sonia. Today we're going to do a blue Himalayan poppy, and I had this from a photograph of a park in Erin in Scotland that I got many years ago. So I'm just going to bring that up, and I've kind of combined two different photographs to try and get a better image for our sampling. So let me just bring that up. So here's the poppy itself, and then I've got a couple of other smaller poppies that I've got on the side, but we're going to be working basic with this, where you see just a hint of the kind of mauve in here, a little purplish mauve. You see a little bit of green on the edges here. We have white stamens, and that's the pistil, which we're going to do a light hansa yellow. And we do have this dead pistil at the back here with a few things. And if you notice too, have a look at the little fur that kind of comes off of the edge of the stem. Now I'm going to do some masking here first because I want to have some of the whites left in here, even though you don't see a lot of it in here. I could almost do the stamen white too, but let's keep it as simple as possible. So let me just get my picture back up here and we'll get started. Okay, here we go. I have some water in here. I have a brush, but first we need my handy dandy little Peebo with my ruling pen. Now for those of you who haven't got this process available to you, don't worry. The idea is that you can basically come back in and use a gel pen to get some of these lines in place. Now I said to use it on the side. That's it, there we go. So we'll get these nice light lines going around here. They actually came off, it reminds me of hibiscus actually, because they can't come off a hibiscus like this too. All around, coming up here. I come actually up further. We'll keep going around the back here. There's so many of them. You're never going to capture all of them, but the idea is if you have them already isolated, then you don't have to worry about it. And then we'll put some of those whites in for the top of the stamen. There's a lot of them. I'm just looking how far I have to go here. Again, using the side seems to be the best. There we go. I don't like to have too heavy a fluid because it takes longer to dry, right? And then, here are the stamens that you'll have. Just put a bunch of dots around here to get, and then we'll end up adding color on them as well. So some of them are quite flat, more oblong in shape. Come out here, pull them out a bit. They come all the way up to the top here of the pistil. Okay, I'm just trying to look if there's any particular area I want to hold. Oh yeah, I mentioned adding a little bit to this area of these, because I'm going to try and do a background. Don't ask me what color yet. I think I'm just going to do shadow violet. I was thinking of doing a black too, but that's so hard, a dark gray for our beginning classes. It's not the best. So let's get some just fur onto the side here of these petals, especially around here with this new poppy that's just coming into view here. Get a little bit of the feel of it. They're even on the edge of the leaves, but in this particular version of the leaf, I don't see them hanging around there, so let's just pop a little bit more there. I think there's another stem back here somewhere. That's the petal. This is the stem right here. Can you see that? Yes, you can. Okay, and then we have the upper part here. This is the dead flower, but it's like almost like I'm trying to look for the word. when you have a dandelion and you have the part that you get to blow into the wind, and I can't think of the word for it. So I'm just trying to get some of those little bits. Oh, and there's another poppy behind here that is a little bit new too, and it has a little kind of orangey area in here, right in there. So I'm just going to pop some white in there for the moment, because there will be some little bits around there, not too much. And trying to think of what the dandelion name is for these beautiful fuzzy things. So we'll add some little heads onto them too. And I'll try and remember what this is. It evades me right now. I know that I can blow it and it'll blow into the wind in all sorts of different places. But do you think I can remember its name? Okay. So we've got all the masking fluid done. This time round, I'd like to do the flower first because I'm not even sure I will do a background. It depends how I decide I like it or I don't like it. Now I'm getting some reflection over here, something. I think that's the water. There we go. Okay, we're going to try and work with the color of phthalo blue. There's a lot of recommendation to use cerulean because the phthalo is a little bit on the greenish side here, right? Now we can adjust that by adding a little bit of red, the quinrose to it. We can also whiten it a little bit by adding a little bit of titanium. And we were using a little bit of the white the other day, so I just want to show you what happens when you use a little bit of the titanium. Use a different brush, first of all. Put that aside here for a second. And I'm just going to take a little bit of that and put it in with my mix. What ends up happening is it just, depending on what color your brush is, yeah, there's something on my brush, it will just soften it a bit, giving it a more powdery blue look. So you don't need to have the cerulean, you can use the drink, or cerulean would be good, cobalt will be good, cobalt adding in with a little phthalo would be good. All those things work. And of course, the best thing of all is we do it really lightly to begin with. Now, I'm still looking at wet here, so we cannot just go into that, but we can go into the side flower and test it out just with a little bit of faint water here. Okay. That is really light, but lots of water. Let's go over here where it's not the masking has, and just watch. This is the stamen. I just want to try it out because we really want to go into the stamen too. How about up here? Let's try up here where I just adding in water. And if you notice, look what I'm doing. I'm not actually mixing on the tray anywhere. And of course that's going to confuse a few of you because you're used to me suggesting you mix and make sure you've got color in there first before you actually paint. So what I'm looking for is a free tray to actually mix with. And these are good habits to have because you don't get into a pickle like I often do, trying to scramble to get the right coloring. I'm just cleaning my tray here, 1 second. That's the other important thing, is to get all the colors out of your tray. If you haven't used it for a while, you should just take it to the sink and wash it off. And I haven't done that, so I'm just going to do that now. Okay, so we're going to be using very light blues. Just test that out there. Okay, so here's the phthalo. We want lots of water. There it goes. It's nice and light. So let's just drop that in there. A nice light wash. Now see how wet that is? That's going to do a few things. It could get a blossom. Not sure how that's going to react. So we're just going to go in and we're just going to add more of that same thing right along here. Because the color is varied around the different areas. Now let's try it without the water. Meaning that I pre-wet a lot of this area, right? So you can definitely see the puddling. I'm using a very large brush. You can see that too. But a large brush is always easier to use when you have a large surface because it's easier to pop in there. I'm going to leave that there. Just a little escapee dot there. I'm not going to worry about it. And I'm trying to stay away from the masking fluid so I don't get it on my brush. Okay, this is a flat surface. So you see, it's still, even with the addition, there's no water on the paper here. I was just using my brush on here. It's not quite as full of water as this is. Now I can lift that up by just using my brush there. And we're going to come up here. We're going to pop it in here too. And if I was smart, I would get my glasses on. Now I'm just looking at my picture, which is sideways at the moment, because there's definitely shadows in certain areas. So depending how it likes it turning itself. Okay. See that blossom up there? Oh, you don't see that? No, you don't see that. There you go. I'm just going to dab that out. So I'm coming back here, pulling it in, just basically getting a very light wash. So I think the phthalo, as long as you use it really lightly, is going to work really well. And then we're just going to add bits of permanent rose over top to warm it up slightly. Still waiting for the masking fluid to dry. So in the meantime, I'm just going to now dab my brush onto my cloth. There's the cloth. You can just see it. I'm just dabbing the brush and trying to get most of the water and the color out. And I'm just going to sop these up a bit. I was trying to look to see how much I could even probably get these off too. Be careful. Just dabbing them. Okay, let's do the same here. This is going to get darker because it's covered. Now let's just work very quickly. Trying to stay away from the center because it's a bit green in there. I'm just trying to see what's dry, what's not dry, so I don't get on that masking fluid. And I'm really up close and comfortable so I can actually see if I've covered my pencil marks. Okay, mostly there. I'll just come in over here. Looks like it's pretty good now. This is dried nicely. Didn't get quite all the edges here, so I'm just going to go back in with the tip of my brush. I missed around here. And now this is another one right here, so let's pop in the color there. And we can just come around here. That is still wet in the center there. Up here is a bit missing here. Okay. Here too. A bit over here. There a bit. Okay. So we've covered all of the blues. Maybe a little bit more here. And now we can go back in and add a little bit more. The question is, we don't want it to be quite as cool. Let's bring that back so you can see again. See how it's gorgeous, right? But it's quite intense when you look at it under that coloring with the camera and the lighting the way it is. I've got a warm light, so it's a little bit impacted by that too. Okay. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to come back with my mix. Just add just a tiny bit of red in there. Nothing showed up. Put another tiny bit. No, I'm not getting anything. Nothing at all. Here we go. Now I'm getting it. but it's all staying in my brush. Okay, so we get a little bit more of this, a little bit more water, and now let's add a little bit more red. See how we just get a slightly warmer color? Okay, there, that's what we want. So bringing my picture back up, we're looking for the darker blue to come out from here, like that. We could be using a smaller brush to help us make it not quite so strong. There's a lot of color in that, but we'll let that bring around here. And I'll show you in a minute just how to soften up some of those areas. There is a little bit more over here, right up at the edge here. And over here a bit more right at the edge. Okay, and then it comes in here, because it looks like this petal is actually folded over. And this is the inside with some shadow in it. More shadow there. And there's definitely more shadow here with another petal that's been turned over right in there. But I'm going to add a bit more dark just to offset that there, and more shadow right in there. And then it comes up to the top here. It's quite shadowy right around that area there. Right in here. Oh, definitely over here. And just a little bit in here. A couple of lines. And then afterwards, later, we'll do some more thinner lines around here. Maybe just another line there, a little bit darker there. Okay, so let's go to a smaller brush. I have a little one right here, right there. Can you see that? Okay, that is a 2, I think, Escoda, 2 round. Okay, so I can come in now and I can softly pull that up to the edge and try and soften that up a bit. Just like you would if you were great at wash, just add a little bit of water and then pull it up. I'm trying to keep my picture right side the way I want it. I'm not sure why it's acting up a little bit, but that's okay. So a few strokes up along here. Just lift that a bit. I'll pick up the color from there and move it around somewhere else. Where do I want it? I want it over here a bit more. Right in there. And a little bit more right in here. So now what I'm going to do, I'm going to go straight to my pigment. I'm going to just pop a little bit of color right in there. Nice strong color there. A little bit more strong color right in here. Be careful because this color, phthalo blue green shade, is really, really staining, as you can see right here. I'll bring it right out and out there. And I think this is a little bit folded over. So I'll just do that. Bring that in a bit more here. Okay, and so there's a little bit of that pinkish hue in there. So we clean the brush and just add just a little bit of our, find it, check it out. We don't want too much. That's exactly what we want. We want to pop it right in here. Just that hint of color. Okay, tiny, 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 tiny bit more. I'm going to control it on there because we don't need a lot of space, so I can just control it on here and pop it into a couple of these places a little bit, just on the edge. It's not even further down there, it's more on this side actually. And along the stamen just a bit. On the other ones, they're actually, the purple actually comes out really nicely at the base here. So what I do, just, you need to mix it. Let's pull that back, my little mixing tray here. Get some more red in it. That's a nice dark blue, but we need purple. There we go, there's that beautiful magenta there. Okay, and so it's just in here. And you see it at the base as it comes up. Same here. You could add a little bit of water, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to do it first, coming up from the stamen. And then I'm just going to go back in and water it down. There we go. And then I'll have to go back to my reference photo because I'm missing the one that I want. That's good enough for that. That's not necessary. So why don't we let that all dry for the moment. We'll leave this out because I don't have the reference photo to get this one either, to get the proper shadowing on it, and let that all dry. I could bring in a little bit of that red. I could bring in a little bit of green too later. But right now we're going to focus in on our branches. Okay, you can mix the green or you can just use sap green. I'm just looking for my sap. That's Winsor green. Where's my sap green here? Here's sap green. So you don't need anything more than sap green. It's perfect. Just want to just light. Now, you could pre-wet or you could just paint. And I'm just going to paint here. I'm going to add a little bit more water. Here's, well, this is a leaf here. And we can add all sorts of color over top to get this to make it a little bit darker, a little bit warmer. Not really worried. Even if I don't get all my colors, I mean my stems covered in exactly the right space, I'm just going to play. Think you can see that? Yeah, okay. So I did all that. I'm going to add a little bit of that same green, a touch of it just in here. It's just a little bit of a reflection of what's going on down below. You can even just use the viridian if that's a bit strong. Kind of fun though. Just makes it a little more turquoisey. Nothing wrong with that. Play with it a little bit. Add a bit of interest. And then this is green in the middle actually, so we could definitely use a little bit of the sap green there. It was a little bit warmer. You could use a green gold. Be careful. Might be a little too wild if you do that. You can add a little yellow to it. Let's just pull that in here. It's just green in there. Could add a little more yellow. This is New Gamboge, I think. No, it's Hansa. And then it turns into yellow up there. Okay. So some of this we can just pop in and have some fun with around here. I think I've got a piece of yellow there. Just play. I'll put it up here. Now these stems were still green, even though this turned out to be a bit brown, I think. Okay. Put a little shadow underneath there. Shadow under here. Let's see, I'll just do there. There'll be some more darks just inside there. Let's darken that up a bit. Okay. So maybe a little yellow in here, and I have to wait for just a tad because it's all really nice, but it's wet right now. Okay, this is wet too, because I'm tempted to do my background. But it might be too wet to try. What the heck? We don't try it, we'll never know, right? Okay. I'm using a shadow violet. I'm going to start with it down here at the base. Here we go. This is wet on dry. This is a glaze. But because my brush is so large, I'm not worried about even washes, because I want to see if I want to drop in more color, you know, and just make it a little bit more varied, right? Just drop in this little bit of purple there. Here we go. This may be too hard on on you guys to try and make this work, but you can play it and see what you think. You can just use a purple background with a little bit of gray in it. Okay. So now we'll bring it up here. And it really needs to be a lot darker next to the flower, otherwise it just really doesn't do anything, does it? Okay. This is called the variegated wash. I'm going to add in a little bit of green. This is the viridian green, or some of you would call it Winsor green, yellow shade. Going back into the regular color. Oops, I think I just went over my leaf here. I need a little bit more water to activate some of these other colors. See, I've got purple and I've got gray, and then I'm adding in a little bit of green. That makes shadow violet, although the shadow violet is a little bit more granulated. Then I'm going to come in here and just darken all this up. Use that a little bit for shadow. We need more dark underneath here. More dark here. And more dark here. Isn't too bad there. It's quite light up here. Let's add some more color. Get some green back in there. There we go. And more of that mix. You do not need to use such a big brush. 6 is fine. I'm now just going to add water and start doing a graduate wash where I'm trying to get it from lighter grades over here, and I can leave even a little bit of white around that part just for effect. And I'll come in here. Oh, I want more dark here. Now, one of the things I noticed too, people do, they can squeeze the actual brush and let that just come out and play around there. And I need to have some opposites, so I've got some darks on this side. I need a little bit of more dark on that side. More purple came out there, so let's see if I can get some. I have a dark Paraline green in here. It's not something you would normally have. It looks almost like a black. I'm just going to try and add it in and get some of those darks back in. It's looking more purple. Oop, almost lost that there. So let's go back in here and cover that white that I had left, and we'll bring that solid. I don't think the white is helping at all. I'll lift that out, lift that out. You can't see all of that. Just taking some of the water that's at the base here and reapplying it in different areas. Oops, I went over the stamen here. Not the stamen, the stem. Okay, so let me find another color that I can put in there. I have every color under the sun here. And so I've got a bit of a neutral tint, which is a warmer color, and I'm going to drop that in. see what that does. Don't like to have too many colors, but sometimes you need help. There we go. There we go. Let's see where that runs and plays. More dark. I think you're starting to see what's happening here, just playing around, having fun. And I could drop more of the green in if I really wanted to, or just leave it the way it is and just let it sit and play around. More some purple. Drop in some purple now. Drop in the green again. Get more neutral tint and pop it in. Can't put it under this shadow yet because I haven't got enough. Maybe I'll leave it the way that green is, but I'll put some more dark in here. How's that? We need some more dark in here. Okay, that's coming together now. I'm okay with it there. I'm okay over there. I can definitely put more dark on here because I've got all that white that's underneath there for those little areas. Okay, so we're going to have to take a break because right now everything is quite wet. And so rather than trying to do a fix here and use a hairdryer, I think we better just to wait and let it dry out. But I have to remind everybody, you want to pick up your edges so that your color, unless you want to move it around, your color doesn't bleed all over, because can bring some issues in later on if you're not careful. This is okay here. This is okay on the side. This is okay down here too. Just have to leave it for a bit. So I'm going to stop and then we'll take a break. Okay, so we're back and everything is drying, but the coloring of my lighting in the evening light is not great. So some of this fun background is unfortunately being lost because it's starting to dry, or just doesn't look great in this particular lighting. So I'm adding some of that same blue in here just for a little bit more effect. Now that it's dry, I can just make it a little bit darker blue to kind of interact with some of the blue that's in the flower. And pop some of that in there too. Again, just adding more to the variegated wash. If I like it, I'll add more. If I don't, I can always change it. Okay, so I have some nice darks in here. We can add a little bit darker if you want, just with a little bit of lines. There are some streaks of darks. Actually, this color that's in here can be actually brought in and used on the flower, but just be careful. You don't want to use too much. And depends how detailed you want to go. Do you want to be botanical, or do you just want to enjoy a few little streaks of color coming through? You can add more blue from our mix and just see what that does. There's a few more, and you do see a bit of the shape of the petals as they come around. For example, underneath here I noticed that the strokes come up this way and then they start to curve around towards the top. But it's actually quite dark just underneath here, so I could go in with just a little bit more of my mix and darken that, just that area in there, to try and get a little bit more of that shadow. It's a bit darker up here. And in some of these areas actually up above here, if you can see it, it's almost like it's got a little bit of fungus at the edge of where it may have got a little cold and it has changed a little bit. Looks a little greenish too, but I haven't tried to do that. In here is a little bit more purplish, just on this side. The pink is kind of showing through, but not much. We could bring in a little bit more pink if we wanted to. There's a bit of orange here, so let's just pop. Oh, that's a bit strong. That's going to be the orange that we're going to use on the actual stamen. So let's just pop that out for the moment until we get the the other little blues finished here. We'll try and keep it lighter underneath here and darken just a little bit more of this area just above on this petal beside this pistilla there, and then it continues to fall down here. There's a few wispy little lines coming down here where that curves a bit more in here to help it curve. Just a little more curve there, then it follows around a little bit more there. It's quite dark in here. We can add a little bit more of that color in there. That green's good. We can add a little bit more blue to the green, or just add a little more sap green to it just on the edge here, on that area there. Maybe a little bit more on just the little shadow there. Okay, so now what I'm noticing, if I go back, the color of the leaves need to be darker, so we can use more sap green. Get some of that sap green in there. They should be darker, closer to the where there's shadow of something else, and the other will be a little lighter, so that'll help a bit too. I'm going to use a little bit more yellow, if I can find my yellow. Warm it up just a tad. A little bit more sap green on this leaf here. Under the shadow of the, just where the petal would is covering, you want to have a little bit more shadow there. And up here, just a little bit up on the top there. So the only thing else I would do at this point is I need to add a little bit of yellow into the stamen. I'm going to use actually just a little bit of yellow ochre first, and then I'm going to go in with my hansa yellow, which is hiding underneath here. Just because I see a little bit more neutral, so I'm just going to pop that in there. I think, actually, I'm going to just, it should be a little warmer on the edge, but not much, and I'm going to lift a little bit up here. I don't want quite as much. I think I'm going to leave it a little lighter. There we go. It really does remind me so much of hibiscus. Now on this poppy on the side here, I have to try and find a reference photo. I don't see it anywhere. So I'm just going to bring a little bit more of my magenta in here. Just a little bit here. I'll go back to my purple because I can't seem to get just what I want. Try with a little bit red, maybe. I'm trying to dry brush, so I really don't want a lot of water on here, but it's not working because it's picking up another color I have somehow. Yeah, it's just not. There we go. So what I can do here is just add a little bit more blue to it, and I will change to a purple. Now this one was a little bit orange on the inside there where I have the masking fluid. So let's just add a little bit more purple there. We have the purple around here. I'm going to try and pick up a little bit more red. That's too much. So we're just going to soften all that out. But I just want that hint in a few places, especially up there. So I'll just add a little bit more there if I can pick it up. Again, I'm just picking it from the pigment dish that I have here, trying, because I don't have much water in here, trying not to overwhelm it with that color. I can soften this up a little bit too. We can even add a little bit more blue in a few areas. I'm just trying to look at the other one, just at the edge of the petals where it's coming up is a little bit darker. So I could do that here too. Don't have to do much because this is our focus flower. Okay, so I have to let it dry yet again to make sure I can actually take off the masking fluid. It's not dry now, so let's take a break. So I'm waiting for everything to dry, and this has dried enough that I can take the masking fluid off of the area here. So one of the things you want to do when you're taking the masking fluid off, just watch that you can either see it or you can't see it but that you're lifting everything off. So if there's still some roughness, move your eraser around. This is a rubber eraser, and I'm just trying to move it around and pick everything up. I'm noticing that I'm getting some paper on here. I'm not sure. Let's see. Just going to check this. It's lifted the paper a bit because it's quite wet, so I've got to be careful about that. Okay. This is too wet yet, and it will pull off like it did there, so I'm just going to see if I can pull this off if it's not too wet there. Okay, that worked out all right. This is too wet, because if I do that, I think, yeah, this is too wet as well. So in the meantime, while I'm waiting for those things to dry, I can actually work, and let me show you what I'm going to do here with the center, because there is some brownish yellow. Some people use orange here. See that? So yellow, blue and orange are complements to each other. So you saw that with the burnt sienna that I had there. It's actually quin sienna. That if I put that on here, try and get enough water in there. This may be a little too much water. I just want to test it out here. That's a bit much water. Okay. So going around and trying to add that. It's going to give it some nice color definition here. But I can also go in with a little bit of yellow ochre first, because it's just a little bit more neutral in some of the areas. Let's try that first. Let me show you on a piece of paper so you can see. So that's just a little bit more bland. And so I'm going to first put that around where I want those stamens to be, and they're all over the place. Bunched together, separated, even close to this area. Try and, if you can see it, I can see it now, I'm looking really closely, where these dots were. I could put them right on top of the dots. They were a little hard to see at the beginning. Now I'm starting to see them a bit better. By the time I finish this, I should be able to go in and take off the masking fluid of the other areas. So now that I've got these kind of covered, and I'm going to do a little bit of shadow in here a bit. Trying to see there was a bit more shadow just behind here as well. Okay. Could put a little bit of blue in there later, not yet. I would like to put in some of that nice orangey. Let's just drop a few of those in there and let that kind of, maybe a smaller brush. I don't know. I quite like that coloring coming in. Just adding that little bit of flair to the poppy. And remember, some of them were longer, so we could just drop the brush sideways and get those to go sideways. I'm just looking here. It's looking pretty good. You can even drop some of that in for contrast into some of these areas where there was a little bit more kind of, they look like they were a little bit aging, or something was happening to something was going on with some of the edges here. So I'll just add a little bit of that in there. Got them here. There's a little bit there. Even over here. Just looking at that. Even just over here a little bit. And just a little bit over here. Okay, so let's feel now. I think we can take a chance. And so before I do this, I want to add just a bit of, or I want to clean this a little bit so that I have a better chance of getting, it'll pick it up better. When there's a lot of the masking fluid left on top of the rubber cement eraser, it tends to pick at it and then pull a little too hard. So let's try and see if I can get that up there. Now I gotta be careful, it's picking up the other paint still because it's not quite dry. So I've got to think about my stroke so that I don't completely wreck it. I'm going to take a cloth here and just wipe it back. Okay. Now let's try and use our hand to see and feel. Oh, we can do that orange too there. I think we got everything here. And there's just a little bit here. You can use your finger. Just be careful because your DNA will also impact things if you're not careful. There you go. It's a bit strong in a couple of those places, but that's okay. Gives the idea. Just trying to feel my way around here without getting too much on my fingers. All right. I think we've got it. Now, I mentioned that center of that flower over here. I'm using a little bit of this orange in there. Right in here. Just pop it out. Okay. This got a little smudged. All right, and oh, up here, we're going to just put a little bit of that in here where the dread, and because there's still some color in there. Put that in there. Just kind of loosely around. I would like to add just a wee bit more purple here. So I'm just going to test it out first. Between that is the purple. You're not going to see anything here. That's the purple. And that is the red. Trying to get just a little bit more of the mauvey kind of coloring. There we go. And we'll pop that in there. And I'll come back in with a loose brush and pull it up again. I'm going to add just a little bit more red. There we go. And a little bit more over here. A little bit in there. I think we're okay with that. Just maybe around here a bit. All right. And now just soften the, take the brush, dab it a bit, and then just soften this up here. Same over here. Okay, so we can add just a little bit more warm blue. So that's our blue, right? We're just going to add a little bit more red to it to warm it up a bit more. There we go. And I'm going to come back in. I'm going to add a little more shadow in here. A little more shadow over here. Where are we here? More shadow coming up over here. And I'm just trying to look here. There was definitely more shadow along there. Inside here, that's pretty much all done. If I start adding more, it's just going to make it a mess. In here a bit more. Right in here. Definitely more over here. Okay, and definitely more over here. Let's just, we'll leave these fairly loose and light. And we can just add a little bit of color to that just to soften those little stamens up. This is where the gel pen I think would work better. Not quite so strong on those stamens. Okay. I'm happy with the way that worked out. There could be a little more shadow there with a little blue. Just underneath here a bit more. Just to pop that out a bit more. Okay. And then finally, if I can find the right brush, a very tiny, tiny brush. In actual fact, there would be some shadow around some of those little stamen areas. They're so light, though, that it's very unlikely that you're going to pick them up. But you could take a very small brush, get some of that blue in there with a little bit more of the pink to get a dark blue. And you could go in and you could define a few of those in between here. If you wanted to get really detailed, you could do that. And get some shadows in between those lines. The one thing with a small brush like this is you have to keep reapplying the water and going in and watch how much water you're actually using versus how much pigment, right? So then you're just kind of going around trying to get a little bit of that shadow in there. And it just helps to pop some. You can even put a little bit in between that orange too, because there were these little lines of dark in between those. And that you definitely need a lot of dark to get that to pop through. You can do a little line of shadow around there. Pop it up a couple more places here. Don't be too detailed, right? Because you've got a nice flower there and you just want to add a little bit of the, like the edges, you know, things like that. Just something to make sure you get some of the depth, and then you can soften it out a bit. And as you keep applying and applying, it's going to get more opaque, because now it's getting to be the point where it's beyond the saturation of the paper, and it's just going to cover more and more colors, so the transparency won't come through as much. But if we are careful, we can still get some nice details in there that'll help to accentuate the flower. Just a little bit of those lines. Run around trying to give that shape a little bit more, right? A little bit more shape on this side, around here. It's just a little bit more down in this area. And you can keep going back in. You can let it dry for a while. Come back in. Just think about your shapes. As it curves a bit, gets longer. Some of the areas you could see that up at the top, closer to the edge of the petal, there were some more interesting marks, right? So don't be afraid to try and add that. I'm going to just pop in a couple of little blue marks in here for an offset. And why don't we put just a bit more shadow around some of where the petals meet here. We can even put some distinction to shadow in here between the leaf and the other. There we go. Just give that a little bit of pop. Okay, I think that gives you the right idea. I'm going to give you that shadow happening here again. There is your blue poppy. So I hope you enjoyed this video.